But we begin this hour with Bernie Sanders closing in on Hillary Clinton in Iowa. The Des Moines Register and Bloomberg Politics released a new poll last night in both the Democratic and Republican races for president. This Iowa poll in particular is noted in political circles for its uncanny accuracy in getting the pulse of Iowa voters at any particular moment. And the results for Hillary Clinton right now don't appear to be good. In the Democratic race for the Iowa caucus, Senator Bernie Sanders has pulled to within 7 points of Hillary Clinton, who falls to below 50% for the first time this year. Take a look at the big picture, and Hillary Clinton has lost a third of her supporters since just May. The Iowa pollster behind the poll, Ann Selzer, says that to her, quote, "This feels like 2008 all over again." For more, including the Republican results, let's go to NBC's Kristen Welker, who's been following the Hillary Clinton campaign all over the place in 2016. Good morning, Kristen.
Hey, good morning to you.
Do these poll numbers indicate why we are seeing Hillary fall in Iowa?
Well, I think you're seeing a couple of things here, Jonathan. First, you are seeing the fact that Bernie Sanders is tapping into that progressive sentiment in the Democratic Party. A lot of progressives are backing him. They like what he has to say. He's also tapping into that anti-establishment sentiment. We're seeing him chip away at Secretary Clinton's lead in New Hampshire, by the way, as well. Not as surprising there because he's from neighboring Vermont. This poll does look at the email issue. It finds that 61% of likely Democratic caucus goers don't think the email issue is a big deal. That's significant. However, it is widely believed that the email issue is contributing to this overall erosion that you're seeing in Secretary Clinton's lead. A lot of Democrats, Democratic strategists, Clinton supporters say that she hasn't been aggressive enough at dealing with the issue, that she hasn't been contrite enough, that she's been making these jokes that have fallen flat over the past several weeks. We saw her shift her strategy this past week. She really was more contrite on the campaign trail, said she probably should have used separate email accounts, a work account and then a private email account for her private emails. So Democrats saying that they're glad she's sort of shifting strategy. Of course, the big unknown in all of this is Vice President Biden. Is he going to get into the race? He only gets 14% of the votes in this poll. However, if he were to get into the race, those numbers would undoubtedly go up, and you'd probably see him take some of the support away from Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders. He is still mulling a decision. He told Democrats earlier this week, ahead of their big DNC summer meeting in Minneapolis, that he was still deeply struggling with the loss of his son, Beau, who passed away in May. This is a really tough decision for him. It's expected we won't get a final decision for at least another few weeks.
And Kristen, what about on the Republican side? What are we seeing there in Iowa?
Well, the headline, Jonathan, is that Donald Trump continues to hold on to his strong lead. 23% of likely GOP caucus goers say they would choose him. At number 2, though, Ben Carson, the neurosurgeon, at 18%. So what do we make of this more broadly? The GOP electorate also looking for the anti-establishment outside Washington candidate. There are some big warning signs for the establishment favorite, Jeb Bush, in this poll. Take a look at his numbers. You have 45% of likely GOP caucus goers who have a favorable view of Jeb Bush. Compare that to Donald Trump, who gets a whopping 61%. So some real warning signs for Jeb Bush. You've seen him get more aggressive, try to be a little bit more authentic on the campaign trail to try to shift some of those numbers and appeal to some of the base. But the GOP race, the headline there, Donald Trump continues to dominate. Jonathan.
Stunning numbers there, Kristen. Thank you very much. I want to talk about these numbers now with the panel. Salon's Joan Walsh is back. Steve Moore with the Heritage Foundation is back. And Sabrina Siddiqui from The Guardian is back, too. So, okay, what do you make of these numbers, just in general?
Well, I think that the two numbers that if you're Hillary Clinton, you'd want to be looking closely at is one that of the people who support Bernie, he draws 50%, Bernie Sanders, from Iowa Democrats under the age of 45, compared with 27% for Hillary Clinton. That is a similar problem. It kind of mirrors what happened in 2008. The other thing that I would look at is that the Bernie Sanders supporters almost uniformly say that they like him on the issues. So this is not about anti-Hillary sentiment. This is the fact that voters do not at least seem to be convinced in any overwhelming way that she matches to where on the issues to where they want her to be.
There's a number that Kristen pointed out that jumped out at me. I think I wrote this down right. 61% of those Democrats polled, they don't care about the email issue.
Right. They say it's not influencing them, but it has to be in some subtle way leading to this perception that she's either not trustworthy or just that she's already damaged. And I think she did make some moves this week to deal with it a little bit more forthrightly. I think you feel her resentment that this keeps coming up. She did nothing illegal. Other secretaries of state have done something similar, apart from the private server. There's nothing there. Trey Gowdy is leaking. But I think she's just figuring out that nonetheless, she's still got to deal with the question of the private server itself seeming like something very different, very privileged, very secretive.
Well, the Democratic Party, the problem for her is that it gets to her electability. Maybe only 61% of Democratic voters don't care about this issue, but 90% of, I mean, I'm making that number up, but a huge percentage of Republican voters are looking at that and saying, wow, this is a big problem. And look, this is a big scandal. I mean, General Petraeus was indicted for less than this. And if she's indicted,
she's
it's
not.
I mean, what Petraeus did was not
making a big. That's a big stretch there,
This put
Steve.
National security in danger. It goes to her judgment. It goes to her judgment.
Steve, let me ask you about another number in the poll on the Republican side, and this is what I find fascinating. Why is Ben Carson second in the polls? And I understand the anti-politician sentiment that's out there in the Republican Party, also in the Democratic Party, but in the Republican Party. But why not Carly Fiorina, who was a Fortune 10 CEO? Leave aside her tenure there, but she's somebody who's like been in the business world. I mean, he was a neurosurgeon. Not to take anything away from him. But why is he at 18%?
I think what these polls reflect on both sides of the issue, especially on the Republican side, but there's a rage out there of voters. Voters are incredibly angry.
But he's such a nice, mild-mannered guy. I don't know why he challenged.
Well, because what Republican voters understand and know about Ben Carson is he stuck it to Obama. You know, and that's what
Obamacare is worse than slavery.
He's also sort of the unsung winner of that Republican debate. He had a very strong finish after sort of a quiet start. I think a lot of people, his closing statement was seen as the uptick in interest in Ben Carson around his closing statement was significant.
Keep an eye on Ted Cruz is the other issue.
Donald Trump is over here, Ben Carson is over here, and they're number 1 and number 2. But let's turn that.
And Jim Cramer is the host of Mad Money on CNBC. Jim, good morning. Good to see you. Dark day on Wall Street on Friday, that 530-point sell-off. A lot of people thought the weekend would calm things down. Overnight, it's not looking so good.
No, this all started in China, and China continues to, I have to call it a crash. There's no short way to put it. There is just a tremendous decline coming from China, and we are importing it.
And just explain why we're importing it, why that impacts us so dramatically here.
Well, first of all, I think what's happened is that we're all connected. We know that. Second, China is the world's second largest economy, so there's no avoiding it. But I also want to point out that we're stronger than they are. We're the strongest we've been. You used some numbers from when we last had a correction. We're much, much better off then.
You said something to our producer overnight, I think on the phone. You said, the great myth is that the stock market always reacts rationally.
Right.
It doesn't always. But given that, is it reacting rationally right now?
We are going to get a 7 to 12% decline if it's anything like the last 3 times that we imported the problems from overseas. Yes, that would be overreaction because we're going to have gasoline down. We're going to see the dollar go down. That's very, very important. We're going to see probably interest rates on hold if the Federal Reserve pays any attention to this.
If we get to 10%, an official correction, how do we know if it is just that? What are the signs that it could go longer, last longer, and go deeper?
Well, we would have to see a spike in unemployment, which is probably unlikely. We would have to see interest rates and inflation go higher, which is definitely off the table. And we'd have to see a banking crisis here, which I just think is inconceivable.
One of the other things you say is, and you've said this many times on the show, nobody's ever made a dime panicking.
Right.
Having said that, what should the average investor do as we're in this process?
On Friday, 403 of the 500 stocks in the S&P were up versus 2 years ago. If you have big profits, there's nothing wrong with taking some off the table. It is going to be a bad day. It probably is going to be a bad week. That said, if you have no stock, if you're looking to be able to put some money to work for your retirement account, I think by the end of the day today, you should make a move.
Jim Cramer, good advice as always. Thanks very much. Savannah?
All right, Matt, thank you.